Thank you everyone for joining us. Today we're with Mitchell Taylor from Taylor Wakefield Wines. Their story began in 1969 when Bill Taylor Sr. headed to the Clare Valley on the gut instinct that there was great potential for Cabernet Sauvignon. After an early start, winning the Montgomery Trophy with the first vintage, Taylors have gone on to win a plethora of awards over the years, including the world's best Cabernet for their 2014 Visionary, proving that that early trophy was no fluke. Today, last year, Taylors celebrated their 50th anniversary, and they're part of the core quality Australian wineries building rich history as members of Australia's first family of wines. Mitchell is part of a band of the third generation of the founding family running the company, both as a trained winemaker and now the MD. Today, we're going to talk to him about the 2020 vintage and some of the challenges they have faced, both unique to Taylors and some more familiar to us all. So, hi, Mitchell. Thanks for joining us. Is there anything else you'd like to add on Taylors? Otherwise, could you give us a quick overview on the 2020 vintage?
No, well, thanks, Will. Great to be here, and terrific to see all the friendly faces from the UK. I do really feel for communicating this way, because normally I love getting into the trade and visiting everyone over in the UK. But it's just been extraordinary to see the images of what's been happening in the UK and London, even to see your dear old Prime Minister Boris close to death. You know, it really is extraordinary times. But we've been down here in Australia, we've been sort of maybe two or 3 weeks behind the cycle, but we've been very watching very closely, particularly as we've gone into our busiest time of the year at vintage. You know, been really worried about, you know, our whole business being closed down and you know, the sustainability of what we've been doing going forward. And just as a bit of a pre-run, we're still in drought in the Clare Valley of South Australia, and this is our 51st vintage, but it is basically our driest year on record. We've only had 230 mils of rainfall for the whole year, and it really has been, you know, a tough lead-in. And just as we were preparing with all this drought and dryness, as we were getting into the ripening period for the vineyards, we then had, as you probably saw over the January period, we had the horrendous bushfires throughout Australia. And a lot of our growers, there's some images coming up of the lovely grapes when they're set properly on the Clare Valley estate. But just down the road from where we take a lot of our fruit, particularly for our Pinot Noir, Sauvignon Blanc, and some of our Chardonnay, big bushfires went through the Adelaide Hills and decimated that area. 30% of all the Adelaide Hills went, and a lot of our growers just rang up and said, look, sorry, we won't be delivering any grapes at all. So yeah, quite a tough lead into the vintage, when we already knew that we'd have some very difficult conditions with the drought. And the other thing that was really weird with the way the weather patterns are with all the climate change was we had some very, very cool nights in about the December period, which really did affect the fruit set that we got. So not only did we have a dry year, but in the cool climate regions of South Australia, particularly the Clare Valley, our fruit set for our sturdy grape varieties was very up and down. So really hen and chicken, and a lot of the bunches just weren't filling out. So a bit of a double whammy on that one.
There was a cooler run into the vintage as well? I've just been nudged about.
There was, yeah. We had some nice cool conditions, and ideally, as we see, our vintages are getting, with climate change, getting earlier each year, and we're actually putting a lot more new capacity and equipment at the winery to counter that, so that we've got a smaller window to pick the grapes at the optimum ripening time. So what we've actually did this year was built that capacity up, and then with the coolness, what is the great thing about this vintage is we've been able to process, look at the ripening patterns, and really get the grapes right at that perfect time to make outstanding wine.
Oh, fantastic. I was looking at your Instagram feed, and I saw the guys in the warehouse playing basketball. You can see they were just geared up, waiting for the grapes to start coming in. And it's
yeah. Well, that was it. It was really, you know, with our capacity, we were probably expecting. We're down 60%. So yeah, we had a bit of that attitude that you know, just wanting it to be a larger one. But then the guys, yeah, everyone's been very adaptive and yeah, have really you know, really taken to the you know, to the tasks of it all. And then in the background, of course, we've had the tragedy of the coronavirus from our friends in Wuhan. It's gone all around the globe, but just how unbelievable it was. We've had these cruise liners that have been dropping off in Australia, and one of our cellar hands went down to pick up his son, who just got off the cruise ship, and in the middle of, you know, this was one of the worst cases of the virus that was mismanaged by the government. Then 4 hours later, he, after being in the car with his son, he turned up to do vintage work with us. So luckily we got on top of that one quickly, because we didn't want to have to isolate and send everyone home. So we you know, but it just shows you how quickly this virus spreads and how it can impact everyone, you know, in all facets of the world, particularly in a remote place like Clare.
I mean, if we're talking about the kind of key events and challenges of the 2020 vintage, I mean, you've touched on the bushfires and COVID-19. I mean, with regards to the bushfires, obviously you've got the fruit coming in from Adelaide. I mean, how is that going to affect what you produce this year? And then, as a kind of secondary question, kind of with your position with Wine Australia and Australia's first family of wines, kind of how is that affecting the wider industry?
Yeah, well, what we've noticed is, you know, from an industry perspective, a lot of the cooler climates, particularly in South Australia, the yields have been down a lot. They've been affected by bushfires. We also had big problems over in the Hunter Valley near Sydney, with a lot of smoke taint from the early residual of all the smoke. So we've done a lot of work with the Australian Wine Research Institute in measuring that amount of taint in the actual grapes, and we've been able to very scientifically reject the fruit so that we don't bring it in towards the wineries. Parts of Australia are having very good vintages. Only about 1% of the total vineyards in the country were affected by bushfire. And the riverland, the high irrigation areas, have probably done better than the rest of the cool climate regions. But what we're noticing from Margaret River down the southeast Coonawarra, while the yields are down a little bit, the quality really does look exceptional. And we're really calling it quite early. We've never seen such intense colours, such great textures and tannin structures in the wines. So we believe that, this could be one of the best ever. But when it comes to the rest of the industry, particularly, you know, my friends in AFFW, some of them are struggling quite a bit. And there was actually an article stating that about 30% of Australian wineries might not survive this latest crisis, because it's just one continual thing on top of another, and particularly a lot of the small wineries that rely on tourism at their own cellar door, because now all the cellar doors are closed. And the other thing is they really rely on the restaurant part of the trade. So they sell basically all their wines on the on-premise sector, and with all the restaurants closed now, a lot of them are in a lot of financial stress. So we've been lobbying very closely with our government to get assistance, to have packages that are available for industry. But at the same time, you know, we are a very highly taxed wine producing country here domestically. So hopefully we'll get a bit of relief, you know, on those fronts.
I mean, you before this we had a chat and you were talking about the impact of COVID-19, and you were saying that you had lobbied the government to ensure the wine business was seen as an essential, one of the essential businesses. I mean, how has it impacted your ability to bring in the harvest? Is there issues with staff? You talked about having one guy coming in, having been to his son with a cruise ship. How has it impacted you, and what do you need to do about it?
What it's done is, you know, we've really had to get focused with government to say, you know, we really do need to look after regional Australia. And so we've lobbied with the agricultural minister, who has agreed that for regional Australia, because we operate across 65 regional areas throughout the country, that it is essential that we keep the logistics and the supply chain open for this very important industry, and to keep the communities alive. So that has been great to get that support early on, so that then, you know, we've been able to say, excuse me, to all the team, you know, don't worry, we will keep operational, because a lot of our workers, you know, they're not able to work, you know, from home. They really do need to be at the winery. And the other terrific thing is that when everyone is uncertain, when everyone isn't aware of where to go, I think when they're at home, they look to a great substance like wine, you know, to help us get through these hard times. So there's actually been a surge in demand in the bottle shops throughout Australia and around the supermarkets. So that's been, you know, positive to tell all our staff, even our casual workers that are working the vintage, that yeah, we're required to work all the way through. So that's been a blessing, and I think it's been very good that we've been able to you know, have that direct link with government on that issue.
I mean, before we move on to kind of what you've done differently this vintage and how you've evolved, were there any other big events this vintage that you needed to face, or challenges?
No, look, I think the big thing really was just the logistical side. You know, we've got a lot of growers. We've got a lot of you know, we take grapes in from all over South Australia to the, you know, Coonawarra, which is about 800 kilometres away from the winery. So it was really just the, you know, the logistics of having to close your cellar door, so we had no visitors, having to close off, you know, people entering our winery that weren't doing it on specific logistics. And it was really just the communication path that we had to install with all our people. And, you know, we've got a great team and a lot of long-term relationships with our grower networks, and they understand how we are. So it was, yeah, it was terrific to, you know, work together to make sure we didn't let all these distractions, because things were sort of changing from a government legislation time, you know, sort of every 24 hours, because the politicians, they tend to love talking all the time, but they tend to hit the panic buttons. So I think it was good that we were able just to focus on the real key things, and that was getting, you know, our grapes at the optimum time, delivered at the right time, and scheduling it in with all our partners.
It's amazing how quickly everyone has evolved and moved with what, you know, this. I've never done a Zoom meeting until about 10 days ago. And it's amazing how quickly we adapt.
How we all adapt.
The grapes weren't waiting, were they? Great. So you talked about your ability to bring all the grapes in at an optimum time. Obviously, Wakefield, you are where you are because you're constantly evolving. What's new specifically this year? How have you innovated in the vineyard and the winery?
Yeah, what we've done is, again, for us, it all starts in the vineyard. So, you know, we are in a very dry part of the world, but what we've really looked at is our irrigation systems. This is our, you know, first day of vintage, when everything was looking positive, and what we've been able to do is bring in a lot of night irrigation, work our soil probes very well, and really get the vines in great balance, so that, you know, water is such a rare commodity for us. We've got to actually monitor it to such a degree on the science thing that we're getting the right balance on the vines and getting the right water at the right time. So we did a lot of good work there with, you know, the beautiful Terra Rossa soils that we have, and really building up our mulch so that we were recycling, you know, our grape skins, our mulch, and really being very sustainable in keeping all that fertile mulch within the root zone of the vines that we were doing. Then, as I said before, with climate change on, and with the smaller window of when to pick the grapes, we actually did bolster our capacity. So we got another thing that we've done is we've put in a new Pira press, so we've doubled our pressing capacity. But what we're very much into is whole bunch pressing. So when we bring above those presses, we're probably now the largest winery in Australia that can actually feed grapes directly into those presses at a reasonable scale without having to macerate them or crush them through a crusher. And that's been perfect for making our Rieslings, our Chardonnay, really having those lovely, elegant styles where you want the skin separation done as quickly as possible. So, you know, that's been a great breakthrough for us this year through the vintage. The other thing is, at the tail end of it, we've been looking at our batches and our ferment sizes, and we've done a lot of work with our headless barrels, but also our pearls, where we've got these pearl stainless steel egg fermenters that have really been making really lovely soft styles of wine. And then we've been transferring that technology into oak pearl barrels that have really enabled us to get that extended skin contact and to ferment not just at the end, but to really use these new barrels with new oak, get that integration going right at the beginning of the ferment, but then letting the lees, the yeast, and the skin soak there for 4 to 6 weeks. And we believe this really gives an extra textural, savoury, really soft style to our palates, rather than just, you know, putting them into stainless steel and taking them out in a quick fashion. And particularly with the lower yields now that we've had this year, we've been able to really finesse that all the way through. So, you know, we're very excited with some of these new technologies that we're trying with from different coopers that will really have some exciting parcels to look at in about 6 months' time, when the ferments have come off their lees and have settled down.
I think I particularly liked all your Easter Instagram pictures of various people stood next to your egg fermenters. Yeah, raise a smile. If we are talking about the kind of key varieties within Wakefield, so say Chardonnay, Shiraz and Cabernet, how are they individually looking on the 2020 vintage? If we started with, say, the Chardonnay.
Yeah, State Chardonnay looking very, very good. We've planted it on our St Andrews vineyard, where we've got some great clones there. And what we're very excited about, the Chardonnay that we're bringing in, is that process that I was referring to of the whole bunch into the press. And then we're very lucky in that we've partnered probably with one of the most prestigious wine estates in the world, who used to, before making wine, used to be a cooper. And of course, that is Louis Latour. And I've had, it's a pity Louis Fabrice is not on this call, but I've had great joys in going through and seeing the traditional cooperage that's come through. So we're actually on our Chardonnay style very proud of the fact that we're not only using this great oak that we're sourcing out of Burgundy, but we're actually getting some great results from it with the fruit that we've been harvesting this vintage. So yeah, 2020 looks really good, and we've got a lovely textural structure to it that I'm sure will be one to remember. And we've had some exceptional results with our recent vintages. The 2018 vintage has won trophies all around Europe. I've been, in a funny, boastful way, I've been telling Louis Fabrice it's great to win trophies in Europe with your oak, with some of the Chardonnays, but it is nice to be recognised with them on the world stage. So the team are very happy with the progress we've made, because at times, Clare Valley has got probably more of a reputation for making great Rieslings, but we feel at the Wakefield estate, really the Chardonnay is the really exciting white variety for us here.
Well, I'm sure Louis Fabrice would be happy to give you tips on Chardonnay, but if we were to go to Shiraz and Cabernet, you could probably teach him a couple of things. How is Shiraz looking for 2020?
Yeah, Shiraz, of course, is looking terrific. The fruit set, as I said before, was a bit patchy, but generally Shiraz is a bit more high yielding, and the colours, the extraction was fantastic. So we've got, even as young ferments, really full flavours and a lot of structure to work with. The yields have averaged between 1 to 2 tonnes per acre, or about probably about 2 to 4 tonnes per hectare. So yeah, great intensity with those, and some good tannin structures. So we're very optimistic. Shiraz has always been one that goes so well in the Clare Valley with the beautiful rich mid palate that we have. And the one I'm just picking up here is the 2016 that's won multi awards, but we're certain that the 2020 will be right up there with the 16, and will really show that lovely classic Wakefield estate length, structure, and fullness of palate all the way through.
Great. And with the Cabernet, is it a cracking vintage for the Cabernet.
Yeah, Cabernet, again, it was our first variety. We've been making it for 50 years. Very proud of the fact my grandfather started it. But the vines this year, very low yielding, looks great. We've got some very good oak in. Again, we tend to use more American oak with the Shiraz. We've got a great partnership with another lovely French family. It's not the Latour family, of course, it's the Vacard family down in Cognac. And they've really, given us some of their very best barrels that we use on the Wakefield State Cabernet. And again, with it this year being low yielding, it's always rich in tannins, great depth. Just tasting the wines, they're still very, very intense. But hopefully in another 6 months, we'll start to see some of the beautiful flavour characteristics that come through, which we've been able to deliver over the years. So yeah, we're very excited. Even though the vintage was down by 60% from our own vineyards, we're just very excited with the limited amount that we've got to work with. So we'll try not to lift our prices, but anyway, it will be a sensational vintage.
So, I mean, I imagine you're not going to give anything away, but you're optimistic that this could be a visionary year?
Yeah, it will be a great year from selecting. I think we had a similar year in '98 where we had lowish yields but great ripening patterns coming through. And I remember in '98, when it came to selecting your top mark wines like the Visionary and the Legacy now that we've developed at the very top end, we had a lot of material in '98 for those top end wines. We're now in the 2020 vintage. I think that's going to be the big challenge, is we'll have all this top quality fruit and we'll really be spoilt with it. But we'll probably, be putting it towards Visionary, also our Jarraman range, where we partner with other regions throughout South Australia, like Coonawarra. We get in some good Cabernet from Coonawarra for the Jarraman range, and of course the estate range.
Oh, fabulous, thank you very much. Now, the last few of these we've done, we've kind of asked the person we're interviewing crack open a bottle of wine and kind of tell us why they're drinking it. We try not to be too envious, but given the time difference, it seems a bit unfair. We've kept you talking for so long without giving you a sip. So what is it you're drinking this evening?
Well, look, if anyone's got a Shiraz there, this is a Wakefield Shiraz, I suggest you just quickly, pull it out, get the screw cap going, because your palates are better in the morning than when you're tired at night time. So it is a good time to taste wine. But yeah, no, I'm on the 2016 Wakefield Shiraz, and yeah, it's sensational. You guys are spoilt a bit because it takes so long for some of the wines to go through the sales thing. We tend to be less impatient down here, so we're already drinking the 2018 version of our estate down here, where I think you guys are on 16 or 17. Anyway, this is a 16, and it's absolutely gorgeous, beautiful wine, and it's just complete. It's really seamless, lots of velvet, but I feel a bit, if you're not sharing it with me, I feel a bit, how would you say, extravagant.
I think you're allowed to be extravagant. Don't worry, you've done all the talking. I think this, while we let Mitchell kind of gather himself, is there any questions for him? Rebecca, do you want to spot out questions? Anybody? Oh, Aaron.
While there, can I remind one thing while I've been in isolation in between, the vintage and that, one thing I've been able to watch is this great series on Prime called Test Match, and it relives the beauty of the Ashes and how we retain the Ashes. And I recommend it, you know, to yourself, Will, Richard, Adrian, any cricket lover. You should watch the Aussie team take on the English, you know, and going through all the, you know, the hard times we've had with, you know, what happened in South Africa, and then, you know, the glory of where we are today.
I thought it's all about the World Cup when it comes to cricket anyway.
Yeah, well, yes, that's, we've got, there's some interesting news on that too. Is the 2020 going to go on? But,
I mean, the whole sporting world. Right, I think, Sarah, you were waving. You still got a question, or was it about cricket? Rebecca, can you unmute Sarah? Sorry, Sarah.
oh, good.
Rebecca? Sarah, you're still muted. This isn't personal, I promise.
Hello, hi Mitchell.
Oh, hi Sarah, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good. How's Tim? Have you got him working yet?
Yeah, not really, but he's busy with Jack. But a couple of questions. Any markets you've had any difficulties in getting wine to with the recent COVID-19 in the international? Any markets that you've had?
China, of course, that market shut down very quickly, and we have not. We got a few shipments out in January, and then that just we haven't shipped another container since, and they're still a bit nervous there. While they're saying they're getting back to work and they're doing things, we've got a few orders, but we probably won't do any shipments to them before. We had a nice order going into Malaysia, and all of a sudden the Malaysian government, they've really quarantined them hard, so they've cut off their borders, and normally those shipments go in via Singapore, so that one's had to wait. The consumption seems to be pretty healthy in the UK from what we're gathering in parts, so that's good to see. It's a bit like Australia, but and Canada seems to be going along quite well for us too. Across Australia, it's been pretty positive, although it's been very much bottle shops only, and of course all the on-premise, all the hotels, you know, they've all closed down. And the other area where we sell quite a bit of our wines is in the duty-free travel airport area, and that's just, you know, dropped down very quickly too. So yeah, it is very segmented, you know, where the areas are.
No, thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Mitchell. Jane, I think you were going to be released next by Rebecca. Come on, Rebecca.
You're still on. You've got to unmute yourself, Rebecca.
Right. Here we are. I'm here. Hello.
Hi, Jane.
Hello. Hello from sunny Liverpool.
Oh, it's wet where I am.
Oh, beautiful.
Mitchell, nice to, well, meet you even, you know, as an e-version, I guess, digital version. So I'm Jane. I write a couple of wine columns here in the UK, so I'm familiar with your wine. So always amazes me that talking to you from so far away, but and likewise, I've not been on a Zoom either up until about 10 days ago, so it's interesting. I had a question, and now I've got a subsidiary question to my initial question, which I was going to ask you. And the first question was, which is your biggest market? Would it be the UK? And the second question I was going to put to you on the back of that is, of the grapes we were talking about, which would be the one that you actually create most wines out of? You know, the proportions of wine that you make out of the harvest.
Yeah, okay, great questions. Yeah, we're quite an interesting Australian winery. Our biggest market from an export point of view would probably be between New Zealand. I mean, of course, Australia is a very big market for us, so we sell majority of our wine in Australia, but it'd be between New Zealand and the UK. and New Zealand love, you know, our brand, and have followed it for many years, and so we get a great following on our reds, particularly for such a small population. And then third would probably be Canada, but then we have China was growing very quickly, and we are predicting that China might overtake all the other markets in the future, but that was prior to the big disruption. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the Chinese market does recover. I mean, it's enormous for the Australian wine industry. It is 3 times bigger than the UK market. So it's got potential, and particularly that they love the red wines and they love the prestige wines. So so that's one. And the other one that we're trying to get going a bit is the USA. And the USA, from an industry point of view, is about the same as the UK, but it just needs to be rebooted, the USA market, because it's predominantly driven by yellowtail. And we really need to get the quality premium story, you know, across to the US market, so that they can see there's more to Australian wine than just one brand.
Right. Thanks, Jane. I see we were going to come to Mary next. I can see Will Oakley is keen to get involved as well. Rebecca, can you on there? Oh, Mary, you were released and now you're not released. Rebecca, you're seamless. Mary, we should be able to hear you. Hello.
Hi, Will. Hi, Mitchell.
Hi, Mary. How are you?
I'm well. I wanted to join your call to see how vintage went for you. And I liked hearing about you had a very small window, but you decided to pick early. So when exactly did you actually pick, and how long did it take you?
Yeah, what we did, we start very early in February on our sparkling base. You know, we have a bit of Pinot in our own vineyard that we use for the sparkling wine, and that's a bit just to, you know, get everything ready. So that was early February, and then about mid-February we got into serious harvesting, which was you know, that was the Chardonnay coming, you know, starting to be ready. So started mid-February, and then we probably go for another, you know, we've just finished picking, but so we probably go for another 6 to 8 weeks, you know, from about mid-February this year. So generally the majority of vintage was finished by mid-April, and then because we also source a bit of fruit from down the southeast, down Coonawarra, we had a bit of that came in after Easter.
Great.
Sorry, mid-March. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself.
Thanks, Mitchell.
Fantastic. It sounds like you actually got ahead before we actually went into shutdown, or did you have quite a bit you were still doing after the rest of Australia was more or less in shutdown?
Yeah, look, the whole industry from a processing point of view, we were able to keep open. So while they were shutting down some businesses, shutting down restaurants and hotels, and also shutting down the cellar doors, the actual operations of the wineries were allowed to continue.
Wow. Okay, that's a saving grace.
Thanks, Mary.
Mitchell.
Mitchell, I've just been nudged. I think one of Jane's questions was which variety was the biggest?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, sorry, I got taken away on the map of the world. Yeah, Jane, the biggest variety, of course, is Shiraz for us. And Shiraz is really a variety that does so well in the Clare Valley, very popular, even though we've pioneered more with Cabernet Sauvignon, and the family have more pride with that. Market trends and the juiciness and the fullness of Shiraz has really been the powerhouse. So we probably, Shiraz is our number one, by about 50% more than Cabernet Sauvignon. But they're the big two varieties for us. Taylor Shiraz, Wakefield Shiraz and Wakefield Cabernet Sauvignon. And from an industry perspective, that's the same too. Shiraz is really Australia's iconic wine that I think adapts so well to our dry climate, but it also is one the growers love because it does generally yield quite well with its adapting to all the different microclimates within Australia.
Great, thank you. Rebecca has told me we are next going to go to Sarah. So you are released, Sarah. So known as Mandy for people who aren't.
I know. My other name is coming out. So hi Mitch, thanks for the running through the vintage and all the issues that you've come up with. This week I was reading a report by ABC News and they were talking about South Australia and the impact of the vintage on production levels. And they talked about Clare Valley being down by up to 80%, and you mentioned you were looking at 60% reduction. The other thing that they mentioned that I thought was interesting is they said that Cabernet Shiraz took the biggest hit, I guess, because it was out there for longer, at 70 to 80% down, and Riesling was 40 to 50% down. So I wondered at Taylor's or Wakefield how that reduction of 60% sort of spread itself across your grape varieties.
Great question. What I would say is, we were 60% down, and that's across our whole vineyard. So with the fruits, the actual fruit set was not as good on the reds, Shiraz and Cabernet Sauvignon, so they were probably higher than the 60%. But the other thing is we've got water, we've got the Wakefield River running through our estate property, and we've also got access to Murray water, and we irrigate at night time. Where a lot of the other growers that we were dealing with within the Clare Valley, a lot of them actually are almost dry growing and they'd run out of water. So that was another one that probably drove those numbers down. And when it comes to the Riesling and our Chardonnays, we're the same. We've got a better fruit set on those. So when you're actually taking pictures of the bunches are good. The bunches look good and full for Riesling and Chardonnay within Clare, where to find a really good bunch for the reds was quite a rare thing. Most of them were really sparsely set and weren't complete in their structures.
So irrigation, huge, not just I imagine on quantity, but also on quality. And I imagine maybe going forward, producers less able to talk about dry growing, more people wanting to get hold of water. Yeah, water is the key, and getting hold of good quality water. That's why we've invested a lot in doing this night irrigation, and to really, look after every single drop that we get. We still haven't had a break. We've had a bit of rain just at the tail end of vintage, but nothing to break this drought. So I think really across not only the Clare Valley, but all of Australia's viticultural areas, having that ability to get access to good quality water and controlling that supply is essential. So night irrigation, having dams with liners, having dams with covers, all of that is extremely important and will be important for the future. We're estimating at Wine Australia that we'll probably have, we expected the vintage to come in at about 1.7 million tonnes, but we really think the figures will probably come in at about 1.5 million tonnes. And that'll, particularly with an organisation like Wine Australia that gets its income from the levies per tonne of grapes, that'll have a big
big impact on the organisation going forward.
Thank you.
Great, thanks,
Pleasure.
Sarah. So we've got Sylvia, I think Rebecca has said we'll come to, and then Will Oatley will come to you after Sylvia. Is Sylvia freed? There you go, Sylvia, you're live.
Hi, Mitchell. I have two questions. So the first one is this year the fires in Australia was a big issue. So I was curious whether it affected your winery and how you coped with it. And second question is, it seems that this year you have great vintages. So I was wondering, what are you looking to do in the next 6 months, 12 months? How do you see the winery working given the virus as well? What are your objectives? So I'm very curious about that. Thank you.
Sorry, the first question was around the bushfire.
Bushfires,
yeah, the fire damage. Yeah, that one it particularly hit our growers very closely. And while we were okay up in Clare, it was really dry, had hot winds. We could see it wasn't great for the vineyard. We were, we'd had probably about 20 years ago, we'd had some fires around on edges, but these ones were really brutal. And, good friends had actually, trying to save their properties, were actually, some of our growers were jumping in dams as it was approaching. So what we did was support the Adelaide Hills community and got together with funding and, helping them survive. Our good friends, the Henskys from Australia's First Families of Wine, they had half of their Lenswood vineyard all burnt out. So I think that it was great the way the communities came together and helped, retrain the vines. So we work very closely with our grower liaison team in helping these wineries and supporting them, because, we do want the wineries to remain operational, and we also, of course, want our growers from that region in the Adelaide Hills to be able to recover. So a lot of them have said they've cut off their vines and they're setting them up quite nicely for next year. Going forward, yeah, we're always changing. There's always innovation to be done at the winery. We're doing a lot with different varieties. We're doing a lot around the water conservation area, as I've mentioned, and we're also looking at doing more with varieties that we feel are maybe more tolerant to the climatic conditions. So we've planted a lot of Tempranillo in our vineyard, and we're getting some very interesting results with that. We're also doing a lot with Grenache. Had some great results with Grenache. So we're building up relationships with our own grower base with Grenache, and we're probably going to look to plant some of that as we plant more. We're looking at rejuvenating our own vineyard and really setting it up so that we've got some of these new exciting varieties to deal with. And within the winery, always looking at our techniques, looking at the way we process, looking at getting smaller ferments, and also working at some of this open barrel work that we've pioneered, really looking at scaling some of that up going forward. So things look pretty exciting on that side of things, and we're very excited about exploring the top luxury end of some of the lovely old vines that we've now got existing in our vineyard over the last 50 years.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvia. Thanks for the question. I think Will Oatley, you've been waving. You're also unmuted. Rebecca got that going quickly. Go for it.
Mitchell, good evening. How are you?
Yeah, really well. Good to see you, Will.
Yeah, no, thanks for your time, first and foremost. Thanks for checking in this evening.
Yeah.
First question, is that a Wakefield surfboard bar?
Yes. We did this big promotion called the Summer House of Shiraz, and there are a few of the surfboards left over from it. But yeah, you can see the 3 seahorses there. My son loves it. He's enjoyed testing it out on the surf, but at the moment all the beaches are closed, so unfortunately, yeah, you can't use it at present.
Not so good. Bit of a cheap shot about the cricket. I'll move on, but just Ben Stokes Headingley springs to mind. Yeah, I've been mainly focusing on watching the rugby reruns, just, you know, World Cup quarterfinals.
Well, yes, I knew you'd have to mention that, but we're in a bit of dire. You know, we're very proud to be sponsoring the Wallabies. I was going to wear my Wallaby cap, but then I thought it might attract a bit of what would I say, banter or bagging. But yeah, we're looking forward to the new season coming up. But unfortunately, yeah, I don't think we've got any money down here for our rugby team. So I think we're relying on you good people at Twickenham to send us down a bit of a loan to help the poor Wallabies before all our players have to turn to other sports to earn an income.
Well, I hope they get the autumn internationals up and running, because there'll be a cracker France, Australia and Paris, which will be great.
Yes.
On to wine, not all sport. So you compared the 2020 to 1998, which is indeed, praise indeed. I mean, the 98 was an absolute ripper, and I've still got, you know, Clare Valley wines, Barossa wines still in the cellar. So was 2020 as good a vintage for everyone in Australia, including sort of Margaret River, everywhere else, or just for Clare Valley?
This vintage, from what I'm hearing and what I've seen from the fruit we've sourced, it looks that they're talking a good game over in the west in Margaret River, so they're very excited about 2020, which is great. The fruit that we've taken in from McLaren Vale, Coonawarra, is very exciting. Also, what we did get out of the Adelaide Hills was good. So I'm hearing very, very good reports throughout South Australia, and the Victorians are very positive about it. Unfortunately, our friends like Tyrrell's up in the Hunter Valley, they've had too much of that smoke taint issue, so I don't think they're talking it up. But yeah, generally 2020 looks very good throughout Western Australia, South Australia and Victoria. The only thing though is there won't be a lot of it. So where 98 was a fabulous year and we had perfect ripening conditions, we certainly did have bigger quantities. So I think it'll be interesting to see what the final tonnages will be of 2020.
Awesome, excellent. Well, something to look forward to, Mitchell, at least. A great vintage.
And good to hear, Will, that you've got some 98 in your cellar to bring out when we have a staff party again one day.
Yeah, I might have to be finding it, William.
That's another good thing in isolation. I've been doing, I've been bringing out all these old vintages, just you know, just to work the cellar over a bit. And 2 of them that I've just recently had was our St Andrews 01 Cabernet Sauvignon, and then I had our 2010 St Andrews Cabernet Sauvignon. And the reason I've loved both of those is they bring good memories in the UK, because we actually won with both those years the trophy for best Cabernet Sauvignon at the International Wine Spirit competition. What's the trophy called? The Warren Radonsky or some trophy like that. So it was, particularly the 2010, it was just silk. It was beautiful. So that and 98 and the 01, I'm sure 2020, I know it'll be a year for all of us to remember, but hopefully we can look back on it when we get out the other side and hopefully have some good 2020 Clear Valley Reds of ours and say, look, it wasn't, you know, that tough a year after all.
Great. Do we have any final questions before we wrap up? I was going to say speak now, wave now, or forever hold your peace. No.
Kate's getting thirsty, so I think you should get a bit of a... I've noticed a few of you are starting to drink already.
I think it's almost...
It's getting towards lunchtime.
Yeah, I think so. 1 o'clock, why not? Mitchell, I think we've held you back from your wines for too long. Thank you so much. I think it's been really interesting to hear about the 2020 vintage and kind of how you're kind of having to adapt rapidly to all of the changing kind of influences.
A pleasure, Will. And can I just say thanks for everyone for your attention and support. And yeah, hang in there. Good luck with it all. I know it's from what I'm seeing, it sounds like it's really brutal over there with the lock-in, but I'm sure we'll all get through this. And thanks for the support. And I look forward to coming over and chatting to you all in person in the next, I don't know, 6 months or so. That's one regret. I was meant to come over in June, July with all the family, but I guess it's not going to be happening this year, but let's hope we can do it next year. So thank you all, and cheers. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you. Thanks, Mitchell. Hopefully see you in the flesh soon. Cheers.
All right,
Bye-bye.
thank you.